Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of The Failure Effect, a podcast about reclaiming the word failure and turning it into success. My name is Wayua Muli, and I am your host for today. This week, we're speaking to a very special guest about a subject that is very, very close to my heart, and this is a subject of parenting. Now, Carol Nyaga is 44. She's a mother of three. She's a marketing communications executive and a farmer. Welcome to the show, Carol. How are you doing?
I'm fine, Yoa.
All
Thank
right.
you. Happy to be here.
Oh, great. It's good to have you. Now, your story, I must say, the first time I heard it, I was like, oh my gosh, this one has to be told because it's a story of lessons, redemption, of personal growth. It's absolutely fantastic, right? So to go through it, let's start right at the top with you growing up in South B.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I grew up in South B. That was in the early 80s. So we moved there from Buru Buru with my parents. I was the firstborn, and I was the firstborn for a long time.
Okay.
My sister came along when I was almost 7.
Mm-hmm.
So you can imagine the joy of being an only child for almost 7 years with
Yes.
all the attention and everything. So that was a nice time for me.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time we were moving to South B, my sister was born just around that time. And well, I mean, there was a shift in terms of family dynamics. Um, I guess a lot of things, and I guess I was also at that age where you're now more self aware. You know, at around 7 is when you're more conscious of what's happening around you. So there was a shift in the relationship between my parents. And so cracks started to show. And now, what these cracks meant is that now I had to fight for attention.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so whereas before I was the only one, and I mean all eyes were on me. Now there was a little one, and then I had to sort of, let me say, put out my hand and remind people that here I am, here I am. So what happened is that in a neighborhood as large as South B, there was a lot of children around the same age because most of us had moved in there with our parents who were civil servants, and these were parents who were born in the 40s, so we were all more or less the same age. So those are huge, let me say, friends base.
Right.
Yeah, so because I wasn't getting the attention I needed at home, then I got the attention elsewhere. So sort of life became more of, okay, so hanging out with my friends and just being delinquents. Let me say
Mm-hmm.
delinquents.
Yes.
I mean, it started out as playing football all over the hood, crossing Mombasa Road to go to South Sea and play football on the other side, riding bicycles from South B to Nairobi CBD. And anyway, let me say it was the norm
Mm-hmm.
because it everyone was doing it. Okay, so you can imagine by the time I was getting to my preteens and teenagehood, yeah, um, the my parents now the cracks were really big. Let me say
Right.
the cracks in their relationship now were really big.
Mm-hmm.
So home was becoming less and less bearable.
Mm-hmm.
And especially as a teenager who's looking to assert themselves and ask questions.
Right.
Um, so I found myself getting the wrong kind of attention.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So whereas before I was the blue-eyed boy, so to speak,
Yeah.
in the home, now I was getting the kind of attention of, okay, keep out of our stuff.
Oh no.
Don't ask questions. It was pretty wild because then it was, like um, parents would come to the house and, you just see that look between them, and then a storm is brewing
Right.
and it's
Yes.
coming,
Yeah.
and it's gonna hit at some point, and you're not sure when. Um, and really, I mean, there would be a word thrown here, maybe some shouting, someone getting shoved, things getting broken,
Mm-hmm.
and it became sort of like a pattern. Um, So, and then you could kind of always tell when it's coming. And so, because you needed to avoid it,
Yes,
spent
yes.
a lot of time with friends
Right.
because being in the house meant that you're walking around eggshells. So, um, I mean, the most time I spent outside with friends, the more delinquent I got. Okay, so I was that girl who your parents warned you about. You know,
Aha.
partying.
Yeah.
There was hip hop culture, reggae culture. There were so many things, matatu culture in the 90s.
Yes.
Because I was preteen in early 90s. So pretty much, you know how it goes. Like when you're getting along. I mean, as you get into your teenagehood, the more exploratory you are. And I remember by the time we were getting into Form 1, I'd secured a place in one of these top Catholic high schools, day schools in Nairobi. And I mean, that was like a moment of pride for my parents. But I remember going there and everyone was so prim and proper, and everyone came from, one of these textbook families. And I felt so out of place.
Right.
I couldn't invite my friends over because then there was no space for that. You couldn't go over to your friend's place because then it meant that you needed to reciprocate at one point.
Yes.
So I felt like an outsider, and I think that's where my rebellions now really went a notch higher. So by my grades dropped, I was uko at the bottom of the class. So by the end of my first form, I think I had the presence of mind to know that I was not going to get through high school if I stayed in day school. And I really prevailed upon my parents. Like, really, I need to go to boarding school. Now, what I didn't know at the time is that I was running away.
Yeah.
And it worked eventually. At first they were like, oh my God, like, what will people say if you have to leave this nice, prim, proper school? But eventually they yielded and I went to boarding school. And there I found peace. I mean, there was an element of stability. And yeah, I think my grades went back up. And, whereas before I was feeling like, okay, so life is this the end.
Yeah.
I was able to get to the top of the class, but I was still carrying my delinquent side. So whenever I used to come home for holidays, I used to, party and party. That's the time when everyone went to carnival, and really hanging out with, the wrong crowd.
Yes.
Yeah. So by the time fourth form came, I knew I wanted to leave, And in the mid 90s, everyone was going to the big old US of A.
Oh yes, I remember that.
And that was like, my exit plan. I'm going to leave these people behind and just be gone. And I mean, making applications, preparing for TOEFL, because that's the exam people used to do then. And I mean, in my head, I was leaving.
Yeah.
I was going to leave these people and start a new life somewhere else, far, far away, where in fact, I had these wild dreams of never talking to them again and
Ooh.
just being gone. Okay. So, I mean, you can imagine, all that excitement of finishing Form 4. So that December holiday, I was really on a roll. So just partying, it was like, and, preparing because I was so sure my grades were good. I was going to get a scholarship or something, just an opportunity for me to leave the country, and making applications and all that. And then that's the time when KCSE results used to come out the next year, I think around February. And I remember finding out I was pregnant just before my results
The
were
results
out.
come. So there'd been a boy all this time.
Yes. So, I mean, because I was, I was that rebel, so hanging out with the older crowd. I think by the time I was in Form 2, he had finished high school. So, yeah. And you know how you just feel like your world has ended?
Yeah.
Because I had these plans, I was leaving and I'll be gone. And Around the same time, I also even got a letter from one of the top design schools in the US that they'd given me 50% scholarship. And I
Wow.
remember crying and I cried and I thought my world had ended.
Mhm.
Because then obviously I couldn't leave,
Mhm.
couldn't go with a baby. And well, I think I was still pretty much a level headed child because, I mean, at the time, there were many options, right? But for me, I was, okay, fine, this has happened. We move accordingly, kind of thing.
Mhm.
I'll raise my child the best way I know how. And I remember telling my parents, and of course, there was a lot of disappointment. And because I was the delinquent, I mean, I always was the one who bore the brunt of their wrath. Okay, so um, getting whenever they had an argument, I was right in the center of it because then it became a blame game.
Okay.
Like, it's your fault, this
Yeah.
and this. Anyway, so I remember watching because most people used to go around July and August, and that around that time I was 7, 8 months pregnant, and all my friends were leaving, and I was so sad. But I mean, I was like, okay, so
Yeah.
we'll be able to do this. Yeah, so I had applied to university locally, but it was never really in my plan. So when I was doing my selection, um, I wanted to do architecture,
Right.
so that's what I'd selected, and then I think I missed the cutoff by 1 or 2 points, and so then I got called for design at the University of Nairobi. And okay, so I didn't even know what to do with that design, but I was like, okay, so here's where I'm at. Let me keep it moving,
Right.
kind of thing. So the baby came along. Um, and then remember, I was barely 19 at the time. I was still a child. And what I didn't fully comprehend is that I'd brought this baby into an environment that couldn't give me the space to learn.
So were you living with the father of your child at this time? Were you together?
No, no.
Okay.
So yeah, we were not living together. I mean, he was also pretty young. Um, um, tr- um, um, Tried to support me as much as he could,
Okay.
but I mean, it was pretty difficult as well.
Yeah.
So I was here living with my parents, with a child, and in this kind of environment where there was no space to let me learn. So I didn't quite comprehend it at the time, but what I'd done is add another dynamic to their relationship. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So essentially, what it became that before I was sort of the center of negative attention. Now I'd brought someone else to that dynamic, and granted, it made things worse between my parents. Um, my child and I became sort of a leverage for them.
So, and this was a boy, a girl?
A girl.
Okay.
Okay. So my daughter was born in September of 97.
Okay.
And it was such a happy time for me because I was like, wow, I mean, some sense of purpose. But it was also around the time when I was starting university because I started university not too long after that. And it was hectic. I was young and really struggling to be a mom.
Right.
I didn't know what to do. There was no one to show me really. So it became sort of like a tug of war between my mother and I, like
Okay.
who's gonna raise this baby. And because I was so good at checking out, so to speak, I busied myself with learning, and I think that's the time I really picked up drinking. Okay.
Okay.
Because then it was so difficult. You spend a day in university, you come home, there's this baby, she's crying, you don't know what to do. There's no one to show you what to do. Maybe she sleeps. You're getting short bursts of sleep. An hour here, an hour there. You have assignments to do. You
Yeah.
have nappies to wash. There was no diapers then.
Yeah.
And then the next morning, you have to show up in class. So alcohol sort of became my crutch.
At what time were you drinking, considering the fact that you had all of this schoolwork and all of this housework?
Well, I could find time. I
Mhm.
mean, lunchtime,
Okay.
um, after class,
Mhm.
you know. So it was, I mean, and at the time when you're in university, you don't have money per se. It's
Yeah.
just, so you pick a struggle, am I
Yeah.
going to eat lunch? Am I going to have a beer?
Right.
Kind of thing.
Mhm.
But I'd been drinking since I was 16, and
Okay.
I was 19, 20. So really, it didn't seem like a big deal.
Mhm.
Um, anyway, university was okay. I mean, learned so much. By the time I was finishing, I'd sort of picked out my major, which was graphic design, and I knew I wanted to work in advertising because
Mhm.
advertising was this place.
Right.
There were so many glory stories that we used to hear
Mhm.
about the people ahead of us, and
Mhm.
I was like, I need to get into an ad agency.
Mhm.
So my first job was a designer in an upstart company, and it was good. But really, it was okay, fine. This is okay, but I want to get into an agency, and I want to get into an agency. And I remember dropping my CV around, like over lunch hour,
Mhm.
trying to get into all the big agencies. And then you see now I had a full-time job.
Mhm.
It was easier to finance my habit.
Right.
And my baby was also growing at the time. I mean, she was sleeping through the night.
Mhm.
So then I could go out.
Yeah.
So you work during the day and you go out. And I was a pretty high performance kind of person, like I could do many things at the same time. So it wasn't really a struggle.
Mhm.
I could function on 2 hours of sleep.
Wow.
So you leave work, you go out, get home at 4, sleep for a couple of hours, um, go to work the next day. So then eventually an opportunity opened up at an agency, and they called me for an interview, but the interview wasn't in graphic design.
Mhm.
And I remember I had to sort of borrow a skirt here and some heels there because I was a jeans person.
Right.
And I even had dreadlocks, just my rebellious nature. I got dreadlocks, I think, when I was 18, immediately
Okay.
after high school. So really just trying to look a bit professional.
Mhm.
So I walked into the agency, and then I remember the MD told me, okay, fine, we have a position, but it's not in graphic design, and we're going to put you in client service. That's
Mhm.
what they used to call account management.
Right.
And I was like, yes. And then he said, okay, but it's not a job per se, it's an internship. And if you prove yourself, then we'll hire you. And I remember, okay, wow, not a job.
Mhm.
It's really about internship. And I went home and told my parents I've quit my job and I'm starting this internship, and they thought I was like I'd really flipped out.
I mean,
Like,
obviously,
yeah,
yes.
why would you leave a paying job? And
Yeah.
but I was like, no, 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 don't worry. As in, I got this. So the job offered me the opportunity to learn so much,
Mhm.
and I'm really glad I took that leap of faith. But now, what happened is I entered that industry where, let me say, alcohol was the norm.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
indeed. And all these ad agencies had bars.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. And we had a bar. It was open on Wednesdays and it was open on Friday. And I mean, now I could really live it up,
Mhm.
and it was normal, Um, 5 p.m., you're at the office bar. That's on a Wednesday.
Mhm.
Then you go out, and then, of course, Thursday, you have a hangover. Then you end up going out
Right.
because you need hair
Hair
of
of
the
the dog.
dog. And then, of course, Friday again, 5 p.m., the
Yeah.
bar is open. And I mean, it became a lifestyle. Let me say it's a lifestyle. It was acceptable. Everyone was doing it.
Mhm.
And for me, I always felt like I was in control.
Mhm.
But what I didn't fully realize is that I was using the alcohol as a coping mechanism. Okay. So there was all this, like fear of parenting and fear, like, how's my life going to turn out?
Mhm.
Running away, because I was still living with my parents. Of course,
Right.
I couldn't afford to move out.
Mhm.
Remember, I'm an intern and I have a child. So I'm still living with my parents. I'm still living in the same dynamic, where you're constantly walking on eggshells. You become the target of verbal and physical wrath, you know.
Right.
So there's all these things happening, but high functioning me, I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing well at work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, things are looking up.
And how are things with your daughter at this point in time, your
Um,
relationship?
Now, because I'm not spending too much time with her,
Mm-hmm.
remember I'm running,
Yeah.
okay? Because home is not the ideal place to be. So I'm always out somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this young girl who's sort of looking,
Yeah.
she's, um, sometimes I think about it. I'm like, oh my God, like she was there alone and she's also in this, let me call it a war zone.
Right.
Um, and she's by herself. Her mom is not there. Um, Her dad, by the time his relationship with her was very sporadic,
Uh-huh.
because he was having struggles of his own.
Okay.
So I mean, it's just her,
Mm-hmm.
and she's just there, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And I'm struggling. I don't know how to parent. I mean, I don't have the best example
Mm-hmm.
of parenting.
Okay.
Um, my dad was the provider. I think at one point he checked out emotionally of the home and just focused on providing for us. So that's subconsciously that's what I was doing. I'm earning the money, I'm paying her school fees,
Right.
I'm holding my weight in terms of household bills. So what more?
Mm-hmm. Do you
I
need
don't
to
know.
do?
Yeah, I don't know how to do anything more
Yeah.
because that's all I know.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, I'm sailing along the industry and growing through the ranks. I mean, I moved agencies here, there, um, and I mean, once I got a good job or a good position, of course, I moved out of home.
Mm-hmm.
That was my first. That was the first thing I did.
Okay.
Um, and moved out, and now it's me and this child. And I mean, at the time, she was also now at the age of 8, about
Mm-hmm.
8 or 9, and I mean, so it's the two of us,
Mm-hmm.
And remember, I don't know how to parent. Okay,
Right.
so what do I do? I just continue doing my thing.
Yeah.
I'm providing. You want to which school do you want to go to? Okay, you want to go to the school, and um, I pay the bills.
Mm-hmm.
There's food in the house. I'm not really spending quality time.
Okay.
Um, and remember, I grew up in a place where I didn't even know what friends were per se
Yeah.
because I didn't see my parents make friends.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know their friends. If they'd had friends, we never saw them at home.
Mm-hmm.
They also didn't have relationships with their relatives.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how to do any of these things.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm just winging it. Let me say winging it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sailing through life. And remember, I'm a type A sort of efficiency kind of
Yes.
person. So I was that chick of getting a mortgage in my early 30s,
Mm-hmm.
um, getting a car by the time I was 28, and loan free, So from the outside looking in,
Everything is
everything is
perfect.
perfect.
Yes.
Uh, and remember, I'm still in this industry where drinking
Mm-hmm.
is normal. And
So
that's what I do.
yeah.
And now I've perfected the art. At one point, I worked for an agency that was consulting for one of the better known brands,
Mm-hmm.
beer brands, and that was my favorite
Beer.
beer brand.
Uh-huh.
And now now really I
You've got
mean,
access to
yeah,
all
work
of this.
work is drinking.
Yeah.
There's free alcohol. We are doing activations here, there, everywhere.
Yeah.
On Tuesdays,
Mm-hmm.
on Wednesdays, because it was around Champions League. So yeah, I mean, pretty. Um, it's pretty same old, same old.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then because I used to do this thing where like it's Easter, like for Lent,
Mm-hmm.
because I was raised Catholic. During Lent, I'm off alcohol.
Right.
And because I used to take these breaks, I never really considered it a problem, so
Right.
to speak,
Mm-hmm.
because then I could do my 40 day without alcohol. Yes, it was difficult, but I made it through. And so I never really thought it was a problem. In fact, there were many other people who you judge them. You're
Yeah.
like, Nani has a problem with alcohol.
Yeah.
Um, and then so now I'm in my mid 30s, and of course get into a steady relationship, and then my son comes along. Okay.
And where is the father of your daughter at this point in time?
Okay, so at this point in time, he was too sporadic in her life.
Okay.
He's not in her life anymore, but she's also struggling in her own way. But
Mhm.
now she's an A student, so I don't see the struggle.
Right.
Okay, so she has this mom who's physically present but emotionally disconnected from her.
Mhm.
Um, and her father is both physically and emotionally absent.
Mhm.
So she's struggling. So yeah, so about this time I get into a steady relationship, and then my son comes along, and my daughter also around the same time she gets an issue in her leg that requires surgery,
Mhm.
and so then we start trying to figure it all out. She gets into surgery. The first surgery doesn't go too well, and we spent so much time sort of trying to get everything right.
Mhm.
And now, now I'm struggling also financially
Mhm.
because there's all these medical bills, and now I have to sort of hold two jobs, so to
Right.
speak. So I have my day job, and then I'm consulting. So I remember I used to get home, and then I have a bottle of wine, and then which also graduated to whiskey,
Mhm.
some rum.
Mhm.
So that's what powers me through the night as
Right.
I do my consulting things. But hey, things are moving.
Mhm.
So it's not affecting my work per se. And then my son comes along. So in addition to struggling to parent my daughter, then I have my son.
Mhm.
And wow, so now we have two children with two different needs, and I really don't know how to handle them.
Mhm.
I know how to provide, I just don't know how to be a present mother.
Right.
And all this is weighing on me subconsciously. And I'm now also drinking more. And that's the time when you start getting into incidents,
Mhm.
like you don't even remember how you got home,
Right.
or maybe you look at your car and there's a dent and you don't even remember how
You
you
don't
got
remember how
that
it got.
dent.
Yeah.
But hey, we keep moving.
Yeah.
So around the time my son turned 3, um, and my daughter at the time was about uh, what year are we in? Okay, so she's about 19,
Mhm.
and she's going to university, and I'm so excited. A student, she's
Yeah.
getting into university. And at the time I was working somewhere where it was really, really hectic. Okay.
Mhm.
And now I'm unable to juggle everything. The
Mhm.
work is hectic. You have a child, a young child who
Mhm.
requires your attention. You have your older child who also requires your attention. So I'm struggling,
Mhm.
and one of the things I learned how to do very well was to check out. Okay, so I quit my job. I'm like, okay, so I'm done with this advertising thing. It's not working for me.
Right.
Let me explore something else. And that's
Okay.
when I started farming. Then um, now what quitting my job means is that now I have more time to drink. Okay, so you
Uh-huh.
can be drinking at 8 in the morning.
Yeah.
You're at home, so really.
Yeah. Yeah. What else is there to do?
Yeah, what else is there to do?
Yeah.
You go to the farm, check it out in the morning, um, just make sure things are okay. And then, yeah, by 10, 11 o'clock, you're drinking some rum and some Coke or maybe some wine. And
Mhm.
at this time, I was just pretty much drinking everything.
Okay.
You drink whiskey, you drink rum, you drink beer,
Whatever's on offer.
yeah, whatever's on offer. The only thing
Yeah.
I didn't drink was vodka. I think I drank too much vodka in my teenagehood, so
Okay.
vodka was off the cards for me.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm drinking gin. You know,
Mhm.
um, and now there's time,
Mhm.
and really there's money because hey, I've left the job,
Mhm.
and you had your SACCO savings. I had my savings as well, and those days you could get your pension out. So it's really not, I'm not struggling. Okay.
Right. And your partner at this time,
Mhm.
how is he feeling about all of this?
Well, because we're in the same industry, and
Mhm.
remember, drinking is more or less culturally
Yeah.
acceptable in that industry,
Mhm.
it's okay. I
Yeah.
mean, it's not a point of concern.
Okay.
Okay. And well, business, the farm starts doing well,
Mhm.
doing chicken, doing vegetables, doing capsicum and
Mhm.
things, the wheel is moving.
Yeah.
My daughter is off to university. She's studying a degree, which is to end before. She was doing quantity survey.
Wow.
So, I mean, things are looking
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
But I'm not, I mean, you know how you just feel like things are not okay, but
Mhm.
you can't put your finger on it.
Mhm.
So what this means is that I'm now drinking more,
Okay.
and I'm drinking,
Mhm.
and it's morning, it's evening, and just it became a thing,
Right.
Um, and then so 2019 comes along, and here we're talking around pre-COVID, busying myself with planning a wedding because we're getting married, and then I found out I'm pregnant.
Mhm.
Okay. And I remember, I mean, I'd done 2 pregnancies, and life was okay.
Yeah, the pregnancies were fairly easy.
Yeah,
You didn't,
very
there's no
easy.
drama, no morning
Very easy. I
sickness.
was that chick of, I mean, I told you, high functioning.
Yeah.
So I used to wake up and say, okay, so I'm going to climb Mount Kenya tomorrow, and I go and do it. Oh,
While
okay.
pregnant.
I did Ruenzori when I was about 4 months pregnant with my son.
Wow.
So I was that was me.
Yeah.
So nothing looks wrong from the outside,
Mhm.
but I mean, inside I'm feeling like out of sorts. Um, I still don't understand how to parent these little people. And then there's this other little one on the way.
Yeah.
And well, I think this third pregnancy was different. I was sick from the first day. And wow, it was so new
Mhm.
because I only used to hear about morning sickness from other people.
Right.
I had no idea what that was. Um, I was sick, and my hair was falling out.
Oh,
I lost my eyelashes. I was sick.
wow.
And even the doctors were like, okay, you're not drinking enough water, you're not eating well enough. And I'm like,
Mhm.
this is something else.
Mhm.
So what I didn't realize at the time is that I think I'd been operating on autopilot
Mhm.
for so long. My body just checked into safe mode. You know how you can put your computer
Yeah.
on safe mode?
Yeah.
It was like, okay, for us to survive this thing, we need to get to safe mode.
Mhm.
So then now I couldn't even move around.
Mhm.
Like, I remember one day lying in bed, and I was physically unable to leave the bed.
My goodness.
And I'm thinking, okay, I mean, you know how it is when you're pregnant. You have to use the bathroom all the time. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, okay, Carol, just get yourself out of the bed. Like, the
Mhm.
bathroom is not too far. And I don't know how long I lay there, but I remember crying and crying because I couldn't move. And eventually, of course, I did. I went to the bathroom, and and I came back to bed because I couldn't even drive myself around. I was just in a hot mess.
Oh.
Um, and this was actually even just around the time when COVID was announced as a pandemic. And um, first of all, because I'd been sick for a long time, the agribusiness, I was not very in touch
Mhm.
with what's happening. And you know how it is when you leave farm workers to their own
Yes.
devices. They
Yeah.
start selling off your chicken.
Mhm.
When you're getting 3 trays of eggs in a day, you're now getting two.
Mhm.
So things weren't also looking good at that point. And the
Right.
pandemic has come, and I'm sick. And I remember thinking, okay, fine. So how did I get to this point?
Mhm.
What, what, as in, this is me, Carol, who can do everything.
Yeah.
How am I at this point
Mhm.
where things are just crumbling around me? And I always say, I think God sent me that my third born is a girl. He sent me that girl to sort of rescue me.
Okay.
Um, and she came at the time when COVID was there,
Mm-hmm.
because in any other time I would not have slowed down.
Mm-hmm.
I'd still have been working and all that. But now you're in the house and you're not really moving around.
Yeah.
And it forced me to take a long, hard look at my life
Mm-hmm.
and how some of the things that I'd been doing that weren't very that weren't really working for me. Let me
Right.
say that. And I call this my, let me say, my darkest moment, that day when I was lying in bed, because it started me on a journey of confronting so many things
Mm-hmm.
that had happened in my life. Um, Starting to look at my past and seeing how it was
Mm-hmm.
for me and how it had led me to who I was.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm going to talk a little about some of the things that I learned
Okay.
in that journey,
Mm-hmm.
because the sickness didn't go away.
Okay.
But I reflected a lot during that time when I was sick.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I realized is that having grown up in, let me call it, a dysfunctional home,
Yeah.
had given me thought patterns that were not necessarily beneficial to me and my children.
Mm-hmm.
One was that because of so much unpredictability and chaos,
Yeah.
and we were always walking around eggshells, it sort of instilled a sense of fear.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So all my thought patterns were around fear.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So then I feared that I wasn't a good enough mom. So then this fear led me to a point of lack of confidence,
Mm-hmm.
like, so always second guessing myself.
Right.
So if my baby's crying, I want to pick them up and soothe them,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure if I can because
Uh-huh.
I'm not confident enough.
Right.
So then I'd rather not.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd rather someone else do it,
Mm-hmm.
So leaving that to someone else.
Yeah.
Now, being that kind of a parent who isn't ready to nurture your child emotionally means that you're not showing them
Yes.
how to navigate their own emotions.
Yes.
Because you don't know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You can imagine growing up in a home where every time you said, guys, hold up, I'm hurting, I don't know why you're fighting, and everyone kept telling you it's not your monkey, not your circus.
Yeah.
So then you're not able to own your hurt or your pain.
Yes.
So then I don't know how to handle hurt or pain.
Mm-hmm.
And by extension, I'm not showing my children how to
Yes.
navigate those kind of emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up in that kind of a fear-based environment also gave me this tendency to check out of things.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, if and I saw that a lot in my work, if I got to a point where the job wasn't really giving me that kick,
Uh-huh.
I checked out.
Right.
If I was in a relationship or even a friendship where I didn't feel that buzz, whether it was positive or negative,
Mm-hmm.
checked out. And that checking out also had affected how I was parenting myself.
Right.
Because then, if my child is going through pain, like when my daughter was going through the surgery, I was showing up for her in a financial kind of way, but I wasn't showing up for her to support her through the emotion
Mm-hmm.
of being unwell,
Yeah.
of being on crutches
Mm-hmm.
for an extended period of time. Having alcohol, which was for me, it was a rebellious thing that I picked up, but it was actually a coping mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when life got difficult, the alcohol was there to soothe me.
Right.
And of course, when you're using it as a crutch, then it's not healthy.
Yes.
Okay. Because you don't confront the issues, you don't confront the problems, all you're doing is postponing them.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you try and postpone them, the 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 more
The bigger they become.
yeah, the bigger they become.
Yeah.
And the more uncontrollable, so to speak. And really just seeing that really I'd operated with a lot of pain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was the pain of one starting out as the blue-eyed child
Mm-hmm.
in our family, and then becoming the scapegoat, so to speak.
Right.
The rebel and then the scapegoat.
Mm-hmm.
So I carried a lot of pain. And that pain also came from that point of not feeling good enough, you know, like really wanting to be loved but not getting it, at least not in a healthy way.
Right.
And that was something that was weighing me down. Because then I felt I was not good enough. I was not good enough to parent my children. I was not good enough to be in a particular job. I was not good enough to do a lot of things that I could do, but I always stepped away from challenges because I was like, I'm not sure I can do that. I also realized that I had never really taken time to know who I was. Because I was too busy managing other people's emotions.
Right.
Being in an environment where you always put other people's needs first. You know, like you walked into the house and the first thing you thought about was, okay, so how's my mom's mood? How's my dad's mood? You know, you have to sort of figure out which wavelength everyone is on before you actually show up as yourself, because whatever wavelength they're on determines how you show up. If things are seemingly, or let me call it normal, because they weren't really normal, but if things were normal, then you could relax and maybe have a seat in the sitting room. If things were looking a bit frosty, then you knew to either go to your room or turn on your heels and go back outside.
Right.
So I didn't know who I was. And I realized this persona of me being a rebel and being wild and, you know, being out there and all that wasn't really me. You know, it's just let me say a cloak I'd worn to help me cope. And just starting to ask myself, so Carol, what is it you like? I had never even sat down and thought about those things. My needs and wants revolved around other people. Whether it was my parents, whether it was my children, you know. My daughter likes chicken, so we're going to eat chicken. Never even stopped to think whether I like chicken. My friends like gin, so I like gin. Starting to ask myself, like, okay, so who am I? What do I enjoy? And I've really discovered things about myself, you know. When I was young, when I was around 5, I used to play the piano. I stopped playing it, of course, at one point. And just discovering that I really still do enjoy playing the piano.
Right.
And even getting a piano of my own, which I'm starting to relearn
how
to play
job.
the piano. You know, and the alcohol thing was also something that took me a while to put together. And also just realizing the pattern, you know, hanging out with people who are drinking, even thinking about like how I used the alcohol wasn't from a point of socialization. Yeah, it was from a point of I need it. You know, like you could be sitting in the office and sort of saying, okay, I can't wait for 5 p.m. when I can go and have a drink.
Right.
And saying, okay, so what if, Carol, you just stopped, got out of the alcohol? How would you feel, you know, and exploring that. So after my daughter was born, of course, you know, being out of the alcohol for 8 months, about 8 months, I remember like sort of being excited, like, oh, wow, okay, so now I can drink again.
Yeah.
And took my first drink and I was like, it doesn't taste this. It's not the same taste I remember. But I didn't realize it at the time. It's because now I was not using it
Yes.
as a crutch.
Uh-huh.
I had subconsciously, because I was working my way through my issues, my body just didn't like it. And I was like, oh, this is new.
Right.
Oh, then I was like, oh, maybe it's the beer. Let me try the whiskey. And I tried the whiskey and I was like, oh my God, who drinks this stuff? And then, you're like, oh, this taste, I mean, I remember even saying, is this whiskey bootleg? Because it doesn't taste, the taste was not what I remembered. And then I tried the wine and then I'm like, oh.
No longer my gig.
Yeah, it's not my thing. And then the gin, I remember drinking a double of gin and I was so drunk. Drunk of, I mean, and this was me who could drink almost a whole bottle of gin. So really just also realizing some of the things that I'd carried and taken on as things that could identify me were really not me. Now, I think my biggest lesson has been in parenting. Yeah. Because realizing that I wasn't showing up for my children, for me was a really like humbling moment, and now just trying to show up, whereas it was about asking, how are you? It was really about knowing. I really don't have to wait to hear from you how you are. I can see. I mean, I now started looking at the nuances. I could pick up when my son maybe was having a rough day at school,
right?
Or when he was just not in a playful mood, just by looking at him without having to ask him. My daughter, I could now see her for who she was, and really
Both
just
daughters?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I'm going to talk about my firstborn daughter first, and really just realizing, like, I don't know this girl. That was a really humbling moment for me.
Yeah.
I had sort of created this sort of impression about her, like, okay, so she's a straight A student, she's a swimmer, she's a tennis player, she's good, she's very good. But now starting to understand her as a person, and of course that was my most difficult thing to do, because then it meant building a relationship with an adult.
Yes.
Where there wasn't one. And yeah, I mean, just starting from the bottom, so to speak, understanding what she likes, showing up for her, letting her know that, apologizing for everything, for not being there, letting her open up to me and tell me how difficult it was for her, growing up without a mother, so to speak, has been one of my most difficult journeys. Now my last born found me in a place where I could show up for her from the beginning, and it's been so different for me. I feel like I'm a new mother. I don't check out when she cries, and this is something I used to do subconsciously. The baby's crying, and oh my God, somebody, anybody,
take the baby,
take the baby, take the baby, take the baby.
Yeah.
I mean, I can show up, ask her, like, what's up? We can sit and draw. I never did any of those things with my other children. The parenting, how to show up as a parent, both physically and emotionally, has been my biggest lesson.
So, I mean, for me, my question is, like you say, you're trying to build a relationship with an adult who already has presumably suffered a fair amount of pain and has missed you, also doesn't know who you are. What was it like getting that door open to get her to respond positively to you? Was it
Yeah.
tough?
It is tough. It's an
Yeah.
ongoing journey.
Okay.
Okay. So the door is still opening slowly.
Okay.
It breaks my heart. Because mothers and daughters are
Yeah.
meant to be best friends.
Yeah.
It breaks my heart that we probably will never get to that point because there's so much that has happened.
Yeah.
It also breaks my heart that knowing that I don't have that kind of relationship with my mother because there was no space for reasons which I can only speculate. So it's been difficult, but what I said is that I'm not going to stop trying. Yeah. Building relationships, even with my sister. I didn't know how to do that because I didn't know how to. I never saw my parents interact with any of their siblings, so I didn't know. I mean, and remember there was a 7-year gap between us.
Yeah.
So we sort of sailed along on different wavelengths. In our adulthood, I think is when we found each other. So, and when I say adulthood, I would say in the last 2 to 3 years when I've gotten into my journey.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think it's been really, really humbling, knowing that I was, or realizing I was failing at life, whereas I thought I was
Yeah.
high
Acing it.
rolling. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
acing it.
Yeah.
And the responsibility for me that parenting. No, it's actually when I think about it, it's actually something that a lot of people should give more thought because let me tell you, if you don't consciously parent, it creates a cycle, yeah, and which may take even generations to break because I was subconsciously repeating the pattern I saw with my parents.
Yeah.
Most probably they were also repeating a cycle subconsciously that they saw with their parents. And breaking some of these cycles is not easy.
True.
It requires a lot of self-awareness. If I could go back in time and talk to my teenage self, I think that's where I would start my life.
Okay.
Like, who are you and what do you like? Because that needs to be, and what do you value? Because that needs to be the basis of how we live our lives. So that by the time we're bringing along little ones, we know what we represent and what we do know about life, so that then we are raising a generation of conscious people,
Yes.
who then are able to raise a generation of conscious people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, when are you writing your book? Because you've got so many insights.
Oh, wow. Wow.
It will be awesome.
There's so much. I mean, I'm still unpacking things today.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll write a book. Maybe I'll
Yeah.
write a book.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I will.
Okay.
I hope it's soon.
But I certainly hope, because
Yeah.
I'd love to have everything that you've said by my bedside, by my bed rather, so that I can read your wisdom every day, because you said a lot of beautiful things about the parenting journey and about being conscious. And I think there's a lot of dysfunction in this country simply because we were poorly parented. I think the majority of us were. And it's not because our parents were consciously making mistakes or because they hated us. They were loving us the best way that they could.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So finally, did it happen?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Yes,
congratulations,
it did. Yes, it did.
right?
Thank you. Thank
to
you.
you and your partner.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Now then, I want to thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It's absolutely beautiful. It is impactful. I certainly hope those of you who are watching it have learned something about parenting, and also about yourself and the struggles you might be going through now as a result of the way that you were raised. We hope to see you next week for another conversation just like this one. In the meantime, goodbye.